Hello everyone, and welcome back to our little corner of history where we explore the strange, the absurd, and the downright hilarious laws that somehow made their way into American legal books. Today, we are going to start with one of the quirkiest stories you might ever hear, the law in Arizona that made it illegal for a donkey to sleep in a bathtub. Yes, you heard that right. At first, it sounds like a setup for a cartoon or a joke. But this law actually has its roots in real-life events. Imagine a time when local communities had to balance everyday life with some truly unexpected challenges, and sometimes, those challenges involved animals, unusual accidents, and a lot of common sense that did not always make it into practice. Picture this: a donkey, large and stubborn as they often are, somehow ended up in a bathtub. Now, you might ask yourself, how does a donkey even get in a bathtub? Well, the story goes that the donkey had grown accustomed to wandering around the town freely, often wandering near water sources for a cool drink. At some point, the donkey wandered into a bathtub left outside, perhaps forgotten by a resident, or maybe it had been intentionally placed there to give animals a place to cool off. That alone would be funny enough. But the real chaos began when a sudden flood swept through the area. The bathtub, donkey and all, was carried down the street by the rushing waters. Local townspeople, seeing the donkey floating helplessly, rushed to rescue it, which led to quite the scene. Can you imagine dozens of people running after a floating donkey in a bathtub? It is the kind of moment that seems almost impossible to believe. Yet somehow, it happened. After this incident, lawmakers in Arizona realized that if nothing was done, similar accidents could easily happen again, potentially causing more chaos or even endangering the donkey. So, in a mix of practicality and perhaps a bit of humor, they passed a law making it illegal for donkeys to sleep in bathtubs. On paper, it sounds absurd, a law specifically targeting sleeping donkeys in tubs, but if you think about it in context, it was their way of saying, we have learned our lesson. Let us prevent a repeat of this wild and unexpected situation. What is fascinating about this story is how it opens a window into the way unusual events shape local laws. Many of us think of laws as dry, formal rules passed in government buildings, but in reality, laws often came from very specific incidents. Sometimes they were born out of safety concerns. Sometimes to settle disputes, and sometimes simply because someone had an idea about preventing the exact situation that had already caused problems. The Arizona donkey law is a perfect example of how human experience, especially the experience of living alongside animals in towns and rural areas, directly influenced legal codes. If we step back for a moment, we can see a broader theme emerging. This is not just a story about a donkey or a bathtub. It is a story about humans trying to control the unpredictable world around them, often with a mix of practicality and humor. In fact, this idea can be seen in many other funny laws across the United States, from Kentucky's prohibition against walking with ice cream cones in your back pocket to Alabama's rule about mustaches in church. At first glance, they might make us laugh or shake our heads, but each one has a story behind it, often rooted in real-life situations that required creative or very specific solutions. Consider the image of townspeople chasing a donkey in a bathtub. It is chaotic, yes, but it also reveals something about human nature, our desire to impose order, even when nature, animals, or sheer coincidence throw curveballs at us. Laws like these are snapshots of a moment in time, frozen on paper, long after the floodwaters have receded and the donkey has wandered off. They remind us that history is not always about kings, wars, or politics. Sometimes it is about everyday people trying to make sense of an unpredictable world. And this is where the story gets even more interesting. You see, when we read about strange laws like this, it is easy to think, who in their right mind would pass such a rule? But if we put ourselves in the shoes of lawmakers at the time, it makes a bit more sense. They were not trying to be funny. They were responding to an actual problem. Maybe they thought, if a donkey sleeping in a bathtub can cause a flood rescue scenario, we need a rule to prevent this. In that sense, these quirky laws are little windows into the daily challenges and creative problem-solving of the past. The donkey bathtub law also invites us to think about the broader relationship between humans and animals in history. In many communities, animals were not just pets or companions. They were essential to daily life. Donkeys, horses, and other working animals played critical roles in transportation, farming, and trade. Keeping them safe, managing their behavior, and preventing accidents were serious concerns. Yet, the solutions sometimes took unexpected forms that today make us chuckle, like banning donkeys from sleeping in bathtubs. It is a reminder that historical laws were not always abstract. They were intimately connected to the lived experiences of people and the animals they shared their world with. Of course, the law also has a playful, almost whimsical side. Imagine telling someone from another country that Arizona has a law about donkeys sleeping in bathtubs. It sounds like a riddle, a joke, or the setup for a children's story. And in a way, that is exactly what makes history fun. By exploring these unusual laws, we get to see a side of the past that is often overlooked, a side that is human, unpredictable, and sometimes downright hilarious. This brings us to an important lesson about history itself. History is not just a collection of grand events or political movements. It is also made up of small, often strange moments that reveal how people lived, thought, and responded to the world around them. Funny laws like the donkey bathtub law help us connect to that human side of history. They remind us that the past was full of surprises, that people faced unexpected challenges, and that sometimes the solutions were as unusual as the problems themselves. And that is exactly what we are going to explore today. The Arizona donkey bathtub law is just the starting point. Across the United States, there are countless laws that might make us laugh, shake our heads, or wonder what lawmakers were thinking. Each one has a story, a reason, and a context that reflects the unique challenges of the time. From laws about ice cream cones in back pockets to rules about whistling underwater, we will uncover the stories behind these odd statutes and see what they reveal about human creativity, humor, and the desire for order. So, as we dive into this journey, keep one thing in mind: the world of history is not always serious. Sometimes, it is silly, unexpected, and downright entertaining. And sometimes, the best way to understand the past is to laugh a little. Imagine the chaos of townspeople chasing a bathtub-bound donkey, and realize that these stories, as strange as they seem, are real pieces of history. Now that we have had a glimpse of Arizona's donkey bathtub law, let us turn our attention eastward to Kentucky, where lawmakers apparently had quite different concerns, though equally entertaining. Here, the law prohibits walking down the street with an ice cream cone in your back pocket. Again, it sounds absurd at first glance. Why would anyone even put an ice cream cone in their back pocket? And yet, once you peek into the history behind it, the story makes perfect sense, at least to the lawmakers of the time. Picture a hot summer day in a small Kentucky town, long before air conditioning or drive-thrus existed. Ice cream was a luxury, a treat that people might carry from the local creamery to enjoy in the shade. But as history often shows us, some folks were a little more clever, or maybe a little mischievous. Teenagers discovered that placing an ice cream cone in their back pocket could allow them to sneak into dances or social events without paying for entrance. They would stick the cone in their pocket, walk in, and hope no one noticed. But the plan did not always work out as intended. Here's where things get messy. Ice cream, as we all know, is not very stable. The back pocket method often ended with melted ice cream dripping down the pants, causing sticky situations for both the person and anyone nearby. Horses, which were common modes of transportation at the time, might get startled by the dripping mess, creating chaos on the streets. Imagine a parade of townspeople, teenagers with melting ice cream in their pockets. and a horse suddenly bolting because someone's pants are dripping vanilla everywhere. Townspeople and law enforcement had enough, and so a law was passed to make it illegal. What is remarkable about this law is that, like the donkey bathtub rule, it reflects a very specific challenge of everyday life. In Arizona, it was a flood and a donkey. In Kentucky, it was sneaky teenagers, sticky ice cream, and horses. Both laws are examples of lawmakers responding to the immediate, practical problems of their communities. And yet, reading them today, we can't help but laugh. They are so oddly specific that they almost feel like modern memes, proof that sometimes truth is far stranger than fiction. When you think about it, laws like these are little snapshots of culture, too. The Kentucky ice cream cone law tells us about the playful spirit of youth, the importance of horses in daily life, and even the social norms of small-town America. People were not just protecting property. They were trying to maintain order, prevent accidents, and maybe even teach teenagers a lesson in creativity that went too far. It is a reminder that laws are not only about morality or ethics, sometimes they are about common sense in a chaotic world. And here's the funny part, just like the donkey bathtub law, this law still exists in some form today, even if it is never enforced. It has been more than a century, and yet the written rule remains. A frozen artifact of a time when ice cream in your pocket could genuinely create problems. It is almost like reading a time capsule from the past, offering a glimpse into the daily lives, mischief, and humor of people who came before us. What is truly fascinating is the way these two laws, Arizona and Kentucky, show us a pattern in human behavior and legislation. In both cases, lawmakers were not thinking, "Let us be funny." They were thinking, "How do we prevent a specific problem that actually happened?" But the problems themselves were so bizarre that, from a modern perspective, the solutions are comedic gold. They remind us that history does not have to be all serious battles and politics. It is also about the quirks, mistakes, and unexpected events that make life memorable. And if we zoom out even further, there is a larger lesson here about the unpredictability of human innovation and creativity. Teenagers with ice cream cones were trying to bend the rules for their own amusement, while donkeys wandered into bathtubs and somehow caused floods. Humans and animals both find ways to disrupt order, and laws are the way society responds. It is a dance between chaos and control, and sometimes the resulting laws are hilarious. This brings us to an important reflection. Humor and history are often intertwined. Strange laws are not just funny anecdotes. They reveal how people thought, how communities functioned, and what was considered important at a given time. They also show us that life has always been unpredictable. People have always found creative, unexpected ways to break the rules, and communities have always found creative, unexpected ways to respond. So, as we think about Arizona and Kentucky, we can see a common thread. Both laws grew out of specific events, one involving a donkey and a bathtub, the other involving mischievous teens and sticky ice cream cones. Both became codified into law, frozen on the page, and passed down through generations. And both make us smile today because they capture the absurdity and unpredictability of life. In fact, these stories also encourage us to reflect on the role of animals and humans in shaping the legal landscape. Arizona's donkey was more than just an animal. It was part of a story that influenced lawmaking. Kentucky's ice cream cone incidents were more than just mischievous pranks. They were social challenges that demanded attention. In both cases, laws are not abstract concepts but living reflections of how communities interacted with the world and how those interactions could sometimes spiral into chaos. And if we consider the larger picture, these laws are just the tip of the iceberg. Across America, there are dozens, if not hundreds, of laws that sound absolutely ridiculous until you understand the story behind them. From prohibitions against carrying fish in your pocket to rules about how many chickens you can own in certain cities, each one has a history. And exploring these laws gives us a playful but meaningful way to connect with the past. It is also worth noting that while these laws might seem trivial, they reveal human priorities. Protecting property, maintaining public order, and keeping animals safe were serious concerns. The donkey law prevented potential disaster during a flood. The ice cream cone law prevented slippery, chaotic streets. Both may appear comical to us now, but they were practical solutions to genuine problems. History, after all, is full of moments where humor and necessity intersect. As we continue through today's journey, keep in mind that these stories are more than just funny headlines. They are lessons in observation, creativity, and the sometimes unpredictable nature of life. They remind us that history is not just dates and events. It is the messy, surprising, and often hilarious reality of people living in a particular time and place. So, from Arizona's bathtub-bound donkey to Kentucky's ice cream cone mischief, we can see a pattern emerging. The world is full of surprises, and laws are just one way humans try to manage them. Sometimes the results are practical, sometimes they are absurd, and sometimes they are both at the same time. And that is exactly why these stories continue to captivate us, inspire laughter, and give us a fresh perspective on the quirks of the past. After exploring the comical Arizona and Kentucky laws, let us now head north to Minnesota, where lawmakers took a more moralistic but still oddly specific approach. In this state, there is a law that prohibits swearing in public, specifically in a way that could disturb the peace. Unlike the previous two laws, which were rooted in physical chaos, donkeys flooding homes, ice cream cones dripping on horses, this one is all about words and social behavior. At first glance, it might seem mundane. After all, most communities have some rules against causing disturbances. But Minnesota's law stands out because it is incredibly specific about what counts as disturbing the peace. Back in the 19th and early 20th centuries, towns across the northern U.S. were growing rapidly. Immigrants from various countries arrived, bringing with them different languages, cultures, and habits. Small towns needed rules to maintain public order, but they also wanted to preserve a certain sense of civility, especially in public spaces like town squares, markets, or the steps of city halls. Swearing, which might have been common in private or among certain social groups, suddenly became a legal concern when it spilled into public life. Town meetings, political rallies, and even daily street interactions sometimes escalated into heated arguments, often punctuated with colorful language. For lawmakers, the solution was to codify a simple rule: do not swear where others can hear you, especially if it could provoke violence or alarm children. Now, what makes this law fascinating is not just its moral undertone, it is also how it reflects cultural values. Minnesota has long been stereotyped for its Minnesota nice behavior, polite, courteous, and reserved. The public swearing law fits perfectly into that ethos. Lawmakers were essentially saying, we value community harmony, and foul language threatens it. In doing so, they were not just regulating words but reinforcing social norms and expectations about public behavior. Imagine walking down a snowy Minnesota street in the early 1900s. You would see townspeople bundled in heavy coats, children playing in the snow, merchants selling their goods. Now imagine someone suddenly shouting a string of profanities across Main Street. It is not just startling, it is disruptive. Horses might spook, children might cry, and tensions could flare. A law against public swearing was not just about etiquette, it was a practical tool for preventing chaos in a growing community. Interestingly, the Minnesota law also shows how legal systems adapt to local needs. Unlike national laws that apply broadly, state and municipal regulations often reflect very specific problems. In Minnesota, the combination of harsh winters, small communities, and a growing population created a unique social environment. Lawmakers had to balance individual freedom of speech with the collective need for peace and order. The result was a law that might seem quaint or amusing today, but which made perfect sense in context. And here's where it gets even more intriguing. While many of us might think of swearing as harmless or even cathartic, historical records suggest that public cursing could indeed escalate conflicts. Street brawls, market disputes, and personal vendettas sometimes started with just a few choice words. By making swearing in public a legal offense, communities were trying to reduce real-world violence. In other words, the law was a preventive measure, using the regulation of language to manage social risk. As with the Arizona and Kentucky laws, the Minnesota rule reminds us that legislation often emerges from very human concerns: safety, order, and the management of unpredictable behavior. The only difference is that this time, the unpredictability came from words rather than physical objects or animals. It is a fascinating lens into how societies have historically negotiated conflict, civility, and public norms. Another interesting aspect is enforcement. You might think it would be hard to police swearing, especially with limited law enforcement resources in small towns. But historical accounts show that local sheriffs and community leaders often took complaints seriously. Citizens could report offenders and fines or warnings could be issued. While it is unlikely that anyone went to prison simply for a colorful outburst, the law provided a framework to discourage behavior that might otherwise escalate into public disorder. Looking at it today, the law also highlights how culture shapes legality. Words that were considered shocking a century ago might now seem mild, and social tolerance for language has generally increased. Yet, the fact that the law persists even if rarely enforced serves as a historical marker. It is a reminder of past values, societal priorities, and the ways communities tried to maintain harmony. So, from Arizona's donkey bathtub escapades to Kentucky's ice cream cone mischief, and now Minnesota's swearing restrictions, we see a pattern emerging. Laws are often born from very specific challenges, and they tell us a lot about the society that created them. They document local priorities, cultural norms, and even the kinds of humor or mischief that existed at the time. Each law is a little story frozen in legal language, offering insight into how people lived, interacted, and problem-solved. The Minnesota law also sparks a broader reflection on language and power. Controlling words in public spaces is a subtle form of influence. It shapes behavior, sets expectations, and signals what is acceptable. Unlike the physical chaos in Arizona and Kentucky, this law works on a social and psychological level. It demonstrates that legislation does not have to involve objects or animals to be fascinating. Sometimes, words alone are enough to shape society. Finally, it is worth considering how these laws continue to influence modern thinking. While it is unlikely that someone today would be fined for a casual curse word, the existence of the law reminds us that society has long grappled with balancing freedom and order. It also encourages us to laugh, appreciate the quirks of history, and reflect on how human concerns, safety, civility, and social cohesion remain timeless, even if the specific scenarios that inspired them are now amusing anecdotes. Moving on from Minnesota's swearing law, our next stop is Alabama, a state that decided to turn the simple act of dancing into a legal matter. Yes, you read that right. In Alabama, there is an old law that once prohibited dancing without a permit. At first, it sounds absurd. Dancing, you mean twirling around to music, could be illegal. But as we dig deeper, the story becomes not just funny, but surprisingly revealing about society, culture, and control. Back in the early 20th century, Alabama, like many southern states, was undergoing massive social and economic changes. Towns were growing, music was spreading from the radio and live bands, and people, especially young folks, were beginning to embrace new forms of entertainment. Dance halls, community centers, and even church events often became lively social hubs. With dancing came excitement, social mingling, and sometimes tension. You see, in small towns, dancing was not just a harmless pastime. It was a potential flashpoint for public disorder. Young people might get carried away, couples could argue, and tempers could flare. There were concerns about morality too. Dancing was sometimes seen as too suggestive or inappropriate, particularly in more conservative communities. Lawmakers, therefore, saw a simple solution: regulate it. If dancing required a permit, authorities could control when, where, and how it happened. Imagine a scene in a 1920s Alabama town. A small wooden hall decorated with bunting, a local band playing a lively ragtime tune, and teenagers stepping out onto the floor, their shoes scraping against the worn boards. From one corner, the sheriff watches. He is not there to spoil the fun entirely, he just wants to make sure things do not get out of hand. The permit system allows him to keep an eye on events, maintain order, and, importantly, make sure nobody dances their way into chaos. Of course, by today's standards, this might seem overly controlling. Dancing is generally considered a joyful, harmless activity. But this law reflects a broader pattern of early 20th century legislation, regulating public behavior to maintain social norms and moral standards. Authorities were not just worried about the physical act of dancing. They were concerned about community cohesion, respectability, and the potential for misbehavior to spread. Interestingly, the Alabama law also underscores the tension between individual freedom and collective oversight. Dancing is inherently expressive. It is an outlet for energy, emotion, and creativity. But when large groups gather, expression can sometimes clash with public expectations or perceived morality. A permit system allowed officials to mediate that balance. It is a fascinating example of how governments have historically sought to control social spaces, not through force, but through bureaucratic regulation. Another layer of this law is its cultural context. Alabama, like many southern states, had a complex social hierarchy and strict expectations around propriety, especially in public settings. Dancing laws were not just about keeping order. They were also about maintaining social boundaries. Who could dance, where they could dance, and under what circumstances. All of these details reflected deeper societal values, including class, gender norms, and moral standards. Let us pause for a moment to picture the public reaction. While some citizens probably took the law seriously, others might have seen it as an invitation to rebellion. Imagine teenagers sneaking into a dance without a permit, hiding from the sheriff, or creating elaborate ruses just to enjoy music freely. In a way, the law might have inadvertently encouraged creative mischief, making dancing even more thrilling for those willing to risk it. Over time, of course, these laws faded in relevance. Social norms evolved, communities grew more tolerant, and the act of dancing became a staple of everyday life rather than a legal issue. Yet, the existence of such a law remains a fascinating historical artifact. It captures a moment when public morality, social control, and the human desire for enjoyment intersected in a surprisingly literal way, through a permit to dance. The Alabama law also invites reflection on how legislation can shape cultural behavior. By requiring a permit, lawmakers did not just restrict dancing. They framed it as something that needed oversight. It subtly communicated that public enjoyment was not entirely free, it had to align with community standards. This interplay between law and culture is common throughout history. From dress codes to curfews, from liquor restrictions to noise ordinances, societies have always used rules to influence behavior, sometimes in ways that seem humorous in hindsight. Finally, looking at this law through a modern lens, it is hard not to smile. Imagine needing paperwork just to cut a rug at a community hall or sway to a jazz band. Yet, beyond the humor, it provides insight into human priorities. Early 20th century Alabama lawmakers were juggling order, morality, safety, and social cohesion. In that context, regulating dancing was not absurd, it was practical, even if it seems strange today. And so, Alabama joins our growing list of unusual laws alongside Arizona, Kentucky, and Minnesota. Each law may seem comical in isolation, but together they reveal a pattern. Societies legislate not only to prevent harm but also to maintain social harmony, reinforce norms, and sometimes even inject a bit of whimsy into everyday life. From donkeys and ice cream cones to curse words and dance floors, legal history is filled with fascinating, peculiar, and surprisingly human stories. As we move forward in our exploration, it is clear that what might appear as an outdated or silly regulation often reflects deep-seated cultural values. It is a reminder that laws are more than rules, they are windows into how people thought, lived, and tried to navigate the challenges of daily life. Whether it is a dance hall in Alabama or a public street in Minnesota, each law tells a story about human behavior, societal expectations, and the ongoing tension between freedom and control. If you thought Alabama's dancing law was unusual, wait until you hear about Oklahoma. In this state, an old law once prohibited the chewing of gum in public buildings. At first glance, this might seem trivial or downright funny. Who could have imagined a world where sticking a piece of gum in your mouth could land you in legal trouble? Yet, like many peculiar laws, the story behind this regulation is rooted in real concerns and cultural context. The law emerged during a time when public decorum and cleanliness were taken very seriously. Oklahoma, like many states in the early 20th century, was experiencing growth and urbanization. Public buildings, such as courthouses, schools, and city halls, became more frequented by citizens. These spaces were meant to convey order, professionalism, and respectability. The chewing gum law was not merely about preventing sticky floors or discarded wrappers, it was about preserving an image of discipline and civility. Picture walking into a bustling courthouse in Oklahoma during the 1920s. People in formal attire are gathered, perhaps waiting for a hearing or attending a public meeting. In one corner, a young man discreetly pops a piece of gum into his mouth. To the untrained eye, it seems harmless. But for officials concerned with maintaining decorum, even a small act like chewing gum could symbolize a lack of respect for public spaces. Enforcing a no-gum rule was a way to ensure that everyone adhered to expected social behaviors. Interestingly, this law also reflects broader social anxieties about public behavior. Chewing gum, while a simple activity, was sometimes associated with informality, leisure, or even rebellion. Young people who chewed gum might have been seen as flouting societal norms, especially in spaces where serious matters were conducted. In this sense, the law served as a tool of social control, subtly guiding citizens toward expected conduct. There is also a practical side to consider. Public buildings are shared spaces, and cleanliness was a significant concern. Gum stuck under chairs, on floors, or on furniture could create maintenance headaches. Custodians would have to spend extra hours cleaning, which could be costly and inefficient. By prohibiting gum, authorities aimed to prevent damage and maintain a tidy environment, a simple solution to a persistent problem. Yet, the law's existence also invites reflection on human creativity and defiance. When rules seem overly strict or absurd, people often find ways to challenge or circumvent them. Imagine students or visitors quietly chewing gum, trying to avoid detection, or devising clever ways to dispose of it without getting caught. In a sense, such laws can inspire ingenuity, turning mundane acts into subtle forms of rebellion. Beyond practicality, the law also highlights the evolving relationship between society and personal freedom. Chewing gum is, in essence, a harmless activity. But when performed in public, it intersects with collective expectations about respect, cleanliness, and order. The Oklahoma law demonstrates how societies balance individual liberties with the interests of the community. It raises the question, should personal habits be entirely unrestricted, or should they sometimes be regulated for the greater good? Another layer to consider is the cultural perception of chewing gum at the time. In the early 20th century, gum was becoming increasingly popular, especially among young people. It represented modernity, leisure, and a certain casualness that older generations often found unsettling. By regulating its use, lawmakers were, in part, responding to changing social trends and asserting control over the pace of cultural change. Over the years, of course, such laws have become largely obsolete. Public chewing of gum is widely accepted, and the focus has shifted from strict decorum to common sense and personal responsibility. Nevertheless, the law remains a fascinating historical artifact. It captures a moment when seemingly minor acts were imbued with social significance, and when governing behavior in public spaces was considered essential for maintaining societal standards. Moreover, the Oklahoma gum law illustrates a universal truth about legal history. Many peculiar or outdated laws reveal as much about the lawmakers as they do about the subjects of the law. Why did authorities feel the need to regulate chewing gum? What fears or concerns drove such legislation? In answering these questions, we gain insight into societal priorities, anxieties, and the ever-present tension between order and freedom. Humorously, this law also reminds us that what seems absurd today was once taken seriously. It challenges our assumptions about past societies, and encourages us to view historical regulations with both curiosity and empathy. People of that era were navigating a rapidly changing world, and laws like this were their way of imposing stability and predictability amid social shifts. Finally, the story of Oklahoma's chewing gum law invites a broader reflection on the nature of laws themselves. Laws are not static. They evolve alongside society, adapting to new norms, technologies, and cultural shifts. What might seem ridiculous today, chewing gum in public, was once considered important enough to legislate. And while the law may no longer be enforced, its legacy remains as a window into the values, priorities, and everyday life of a different time. So, as we continue our exploration of strange and unusual laws across the United States, Oklahoma's gum prohibition serves as a vivid example of how ordinary actions can become extraordinary when viewed through the lens of legality. It is a reminder that behind every quirky law lies a story about people, society, and the delicate balance between individual freedom and communal expectations. Whether it is dancing in Alabama, cursing in Minnesota, or chewing gum in Oklahoma, these laws all share one thing in common: they provide a fascinating glimpse into human behavior, societal norms, and the endless creativity of both lawmakers and citizens alike. Imagine living in a town where looking at your own reflection is considered illegal. No mirrors in homes, no reflective surfaces in public spaces, nothing that could show a person their own image. This is not a plot from a dystopian novel. It is a real historical curiosity from the small town of Fairhaven, Massachusetts, in the 19th century. For reasons that seem bizarre to modern eyes, the town enacted an ordinance banning mirrors, creating a unique and often surreal social environment. The origins of this law are rooted in a mix of superstition, moral belief, and community regulation. In the 1800s, many towns across the United States were deeply influenced by religious and moral strictures, with a strong emphasis on humility, modesty, and avoidance of vanity. Mirrors, being tools for self-admiration, were seen by some as potentially fostering pride or vanity, traits considered morally dangerous. By banning mirrors, the town sought to curb these temptations and encourage citizens to focus on virtue rather than appearance. Living in Fairhaven under such a law must have been an unusual experience. Citizens would have had to navigate their daily lives without the simple act of checking their hair, adjusting their clothes, or seeing their facial expressions. Imagine getting ready in the morning. You could not use a bathroom mirror to make sure your outfit was neat or that your hair was combed properly. The ban extended to decorative mirrors in parlors, which were common in homes of the era, meaning that even aesthetic enjoyment of reflections was restricted. Interestingly, the law also reflected concerns about social equality and the appearance of class. Mirrors were relatively expensive at the time, and owning many mirrors could be seen as a display of wealth or status. By limiting mirrors, the town may have aimed to reduce visible signs of social hierarchy and enforce a sense of egalitarianism. In this sense, the law was not purely moralistic. It also had economic and social dimensions. Of course, enforcing a mirror ban was no simple matter. Authorities had to monitor both public and private spaces, creating tensions between personal freedom and communal regulation. Reports suggest that residents sometimes tried to conceal mirrors in closets or disguise reflective surfaces to avoid fines or social reprimand. This dynamic highlights a common theme in the history of peculiar laws: the tension between official rules and the ingenuity of those living under them. Human creativity often finds a way to bend or bypass seemingly strict regulations. The mirror ban also had psychological and cultural consequences. In a society where personal appearance could not be observed freely, citizens may have developed a different sense of self-awareness. Without the constant feedback of reflections, people relied more on social cues and external observation to understand how they appeared to others. Some historians argue that this may have fostered a stronger focus on interpersonal relationships and behavior rather than looks, emphasizing the community's values of moral conduct over physical vanity. This law also demonstrates how cultural anxieties can shape legislation. Mirrors, despite being harmless objects, became symbolic of deeper fears about pride, distraction, and moral decay. In banning them, the town was attempting to exert control over behaviors and thoughts, illustrating the profound influence of belief systems on everyday life. Even small objects like mirrors could be imbued with social and moral significance, transforming them into instruments of regulation. As time passed and societal attitudes evolved, the mirror ban gradually became obsolete. Industrialization made mirrors more accessible and affordable, while cultural norms shifted toward a more individualistic and self-expressive society. By the early 20th century, the law was largely unenforced, and mirrors reappeared in homes, public buildings, and schools. Nevertheless, the memory of such a regulation remains a fascinating glimpse into a world where even ordinary objects could carry extraordinary social weight. Moreover, the story of Fairhaven's mirror ban underscores a broader historical lesson. Laws often reflect the anxieties, values, and priorities of the societies that create them. While the ban may seem absurd today, it was meaningful to the town's residents at the time. It addressed concerns about morality, equality, and social order, revealing how communities negotiate the balance between individual freedom and collective norms. Interestingly, the mirror ban also sparked debate and discussion both within the town and beyond. Critics questioned whether such restrictions were practical or ethical, while supporters argued that they were necessary to maintain social discipline. These debates mirror ongoing tensions in any society between personal autonomy and the perceived common good. By examining this curious law, we gain insight into how past communities navigated complex social and moral landscapes. Humorously, the law also invites us to consider the everyday inconveniences that must have arisen. How did townspeople check their appearance before a public event? How did artisans, tailors, and barbers function without reflective surfaces? Stories suggest that some relied on polished metal, water reflections, or even the eyes of friends to gauge their appearance, revealing human adaptability and ingenuity in response to legal restrictions. Finally, the mirror ban offers a reminder of the diversity of human experience and the ways in which culture shapes daily life. What seems ordinary or trivial in one era may become the focus of strict regulation in another. It also highlights the richness of historical curiosity. Each peculiar law tells a story about the people, their beliefs, and the challenges they faced. From Fairhaven's mirror ban to other unusual laws around the world, These regulations invite reflection, amusement, and insight into the complex tapestry of human society. So, the next time you glance into a mirror, consider the centuries of history, belief, and regulation that have surrounded this simple object. For a time, in Fairhaven, mirrors were not just reflective surfaces, they were symbols of vanity, objects of concern, and tools of social control. Understanding such peculiar laws helps us appreciate the evolving relationship between society and personal freedom, reminding us that even the simplest things can carry extraordinary significance in the right context. Imagine walking through a town where wearing a hat is not just frowned upon, but actually illegal. No wide-brimmed sun hats, no fedoras, no casual caps, nothing on your head except perhaps your natural hair. While this might sound like a quirky plot from a historical comedy, it was in fact a reality in the small town of Hatfield, Massachusetts, during the late 19th century. The law, officially enacted in 1878, prohibited hats within certain public spaces, and its origins reveal fascinating insights into culture, social norms, and the power of seemingly trivial regulations. The reasoning behind the law is both practical and social. On the practical side, townspeople argued that hats, especially large ones, could obstruct visibility in crowded streets and marketplaces. Merchants and pedestrians alike complained that wide-brimmed hats made it difficult to see incoming traffic, whether on foot, horseback, or in the horse-drawn carriages of the time. Public safety, therefore, became a surprisingly valid argument for restricting headwear. In this sense, Hatfield's law anticipated modern rules about visibility and safety in public spaces, even if it seems peculiar by today's standards. Yet, the law was not purely about practicality. Social and cultural norms played a crucial role in shaping the ban. Hats had long been symbols of status, class, and fashion. A wealthy man might wear a fine top hat to display his social position, while working-class citizens might don simpler caps. By restricting hats, the town inadvertently or perhaps intentionally leveled social distinctions, removing visual cues that could emphasize inequality. In some ways, the ban was a tool for promoting egalitarianism, forcing citizens to present themselves more equally in public spaces. Interestingly, the ban also had moral and psychological undertones. Hats, particularly elaborate ones for women, were associated with vanity and social preening. Excessively ornate hats were seen as distractions, not just in public spaces but morally as well, fostering pride or frivolity. By outlawing them, local authorities may have aimed to cultivate modesty and a sense of communal focus, emphasizing behavior over appearance. This reflects a recurring theme in the history of peculiar laws. Everyday objects, even clothing, were often imbued with moral and cultural significance. Enforcing the hat ban, however, was far from simple. Town officials had to patrol streets, marketplaces, and public events, ensuring compliance. Stories from the era suggest that residents sometimes found creative ways to circumvent the law. Some wore small caps under coats or scarves over their heads, while others simply flouted the rule in private gatherings. These acts of resistance illustrate how communities negotiate with restrictive laws, balancing obedience with personal expression. Human ingenuity, as always, finds ways around even the most unusual rules. The ban also influenced social interactions and behavior in subtle ways. Without hats as markers of identity or fashion, townspeople may have relied more heavily on other forms of communication and self-expression. Facial expressions, gestures, and attire other than headwear gained prominence as tools for conveying personality, status, or intent. In a way, the law reshaped social dynamics, encouraging citizens to find alternative ways to communicate visually without relying on headgear. Cultural historians also note the gendered implications of the law. Women's hats, often elaborate and decorative, were particularly targeted by these restrictions. In removing the ability to wear these fashion statements, The law had the effect of limiting one of the few socially acceptable avenues for female self-expression at the time. This reflects the broader tension in history between social regulation and individual freedom, especially for women, whose public presentation was closely monitored and policed by community norms. The ban on hats further created economic ripples in the town. Milliners and hatmakers, whose livelihoods depended on the production and sale of hats, faced reduced demand or had to adapt their business models. Some pivoted to creating headscarves, ribbons, or other non-hat accessories, demonstrating how laws, even quirky ones, can influence local economies and entrepreneurship. In this way, a seemingly small law had cascading effects across culture, commerce, and social life. Moreover, the psychological impact of the ban cannot be overlooked. For many, hats were more than mere fashion. They offered comfort, protection from weather, and even a sense of identity. Being forced to go without them could create discomfort or frustration, shaping the everyday experiences of townspeople. Historical accounts suggest that some residents resented the law, viewing it as an intrusion into personal autonomy. These tensions highlight a fundamental question that persists in legal and social history: how much control should a community have over personal choices? The Hatfield Law also generated debate beyond the town itself. Newspapers of the era occasionally reported on the ban, often with a mixture of amusement and critique. Critics questioned whether the law was enforceable or rational, while supporters argued that it promoted safety, equality, and moral virtue. These discussions mirror broader societal tensions between innovation and tradition, individual rights and community norms, showing how even small towns grappled with complex social questions. Interestingly, the hat ban also shaped cultural memory. In later years, Hatfield became known as the town that outlawed hats, and the story has endured as a curious anecdote of legal history. It reminds us that laws often reflect more than practicality. They capture cultural anxieties, social values, and the attempts of communities to shape behavior in line with collective ideals. What may seem absurd today often had significance in its original context, revealing the intricate relationship between law, society, and daily life. Eventually, as social attitudes and fashion norms evolved, the law fell into disuse. By the early 20th century, hats were once again common in public spaces, reflecting changes in mobility, commerce, and cultural values. Yet the legacy of the ban remains, offering historians and curious readers alike a fascinating glimpse into the intersection of law, culture, and everyday objects. Finally, the story of Hatfield's hat ban illustrates a broader historical lesson. Seemingly trivial objects can carry immense social, economic, and moral weight. From the mirror bans of Fairhaven to the hat restrictions of Hatfield, everyday items become symbols of identity, morality, and social order. These laws invite us to reflect on how human societies regulate behavior, how culture shapes law, and how ordinary objects can take on extraordinary significance. So next time you put on a hat, whether for fashion, function, or fun, consider the curious history of towns like Hatfield. A simple piece of clothing, so ubiquitous today, was once at the center of moral debates, legal enforcement, and social transformation. Understanding these peculiar laws gives us insight into the evolving ways societies balance individual expression with communal norms, reminding us that even the smallest items can reflect the deepest currents of history. Imagine a place where the passage of time seems almost suspended, where residents live decades longer than anywhere else in the world, aging slowly while retaining vitality, energy, and sharp minds well into their 90s or even hundreds. This is not a myth or the plot of a fantasy novel, it is the reality observed on the small island of Ikaria, located in the Aegean Sea near Greece. For centuries, Ikaria has fascinated scientists, historians, and curious travelers alike, earning a reputation as one of the world's blue zones, a term used to describe regions with extraordinarily high longevity. Exploring why this island seems to defy aging offers a glimpse into how lifestyle, culture, environment, and social structures can profoundly influence human health and lifespan. At first glance, Icaria seems like any other Mediterranean island. Its landscape is dominated by rugged hills, olive groves, and winding roads that connect small villages. Life here moves at a deliberate, unhurried pace, and the island's natural beauty is matched by the simplicity of its traditional lifestyle. Residents rely heavily on agriculture, particularly the cultivation of olives, vegetables, and herbs, and on fishing for sustenance. Diet, it turns out, is one of the key factors in the islanders' remarkable longevity. Unlike modern societies dominated by processed foods, Icarians consume a predominantly plant-based diet, rich in vegetables, legumes, and whole grains. Olive oil, the liquid gold of the Mediterranean, is a staple, and wild herbs add flavor as well as potent antioxidants. Moderate consumption of wine, usually during communal meals, is common, but the focus is always on whole, natural foods rather than excess or indulgence. Beyond diet, daily activity is seamlessly integrated into the lives of Icaria's residents. Few people here rely on cars for short distances. Instead, walking up hills, tending gardens, and performing manual labor are everyday routines. Physical activity is therefore natural and consistent, not structured or forced, contributing to cardiovascular health, strong muscles, and overall vitality. This integration of movement into daily life contrasts sharply with modern sedentary lifestyles, where exercise is often an isolated, scheduled activity rather than a continuous aspect of living. Equally important is the island's social fabric. Icarians maintain strong community ties, prioritizing family, friendship, and intergenerational support. Extended families often live in close proximity, and elders are deeply respected, remaining active participants in household and village life. Social engagement has been repeatedly linked to better mental health, lower stress levels, and even longer life expectancy. On Icaria, the combination of meaningful social relationships and a sense of belonging appears to create a protective effect against loneliness, depression, and cognitive decline. Sleep patterns also play a role. Unlike the high-pressure schedules common in urbanized societies, Icarians embrace rest. Afternoon naps, known locally as mesameri, are a regular part of life, allowing both body and mind to recuperate. This culturally ingrained approach to rest is in stark contrast to societies that prize constant productivity, and research increasingly confirms that adequate sleep is vital for maintaining metabolic health, hormonal balance, and mental clarity. Stress management, though not often framed as such by the islanders, is another factor in their longevity. Life on Icaria is measured and intentional, and community events such as shared meals, music, and festivals provide outlets for relaxation and joy. These gatherings foster emotional resilience and reinforce social bonds. Chronic stress, by contrast, is known to accelerate aging and contribute to a range of diseases, from cardiovascular problems to impaired cognitive function. By embedding stress relief into the rhythm of everyday life, Icarians effectively reduce one of the most damaging influences on human health. Environmental factors also contribute to the island's reputation. The air quality on Icaria is excellent, free from urban pollution. Its water is naturally mineral-rich, and the hilly terrain provides both fresh air and a moderate climate, which are conducive to overall well-being. Many longevity studies suggest that environment, when combined with diet, lifestyle, and social support, can substantially influence lifespan. On Icaria, these natural advantages complement the cultural and behavioral factors that promote health. Genetics, of course, cannot be overlooked. Some researchers argue that Icarians may possess genetic variations that contribute to resilience against age-related diseases. However, Genetic factors alone do not account for the extraordinary concentration of centenarians on the island. Comparisons with genetically similar populations elsewhere suggest that lifestyle and environment are equally, if not more, important in shaping long-term health outcomes. One of the most striking aspects of life on Icaria is the attitude toward aging itself. Growing old is not feared, nor is it treated as a decline to be resisted at all costs. Instead, aging is seen as a natural stage of life, accompanied by wisdom, respect, and continued participation in community life. This positive perception of aging may contribute to psychological well-being, reducing anxiety and depression that can accompany old age in more ageist societies. By valuing elders and integrating them fully into the social fabric, Icaria creates an environment in which longevity is not only possible but celebrated. Scientific studies conducted in the late 20th and early 21st centuries have confirmed what the locals have long known: Icarians live longer and healthier lives than most populations worldwide. Researchers have documented lower rates of chronic diseases such as cardiovascular disease, diabetes, and dementia, along with lower incidences of obesity. Even more remarkable is that this longevity does not come at the expense of quality of life. Many centenarians remain physically active, mentally sharp, and socially engaged well into advanced age. Stories from the island abound with examples that seem almost legendary. One centenarian might still walk several kilometers daily to tend a garden, while another might participate in lively village discussions, cooking, and caring for grandchildren. These stories underscore that longevity on Icaria is not about mere survival but about thriving, maintaining vitality, curiosity, and purpose long after most people would consider old age to have begun. Icaria's success challenges modern assumptions about aging. In many industrialized nations, life expectancy has increased due to medical advances, but these gains are often accompanied by chronic illness and diminished quality of life in later years. On Icaria, longevity is intertwined with health, social cohesion, and cultural practices that enhance well-being. The island demonstrates that living longer is not simply a matter of medicine or genetics but of integrating lifestyle choices, community engagement, and cultural values into everyday life. In examining Icaria, historians, scientists, and social theorists alike recognize that longevity is rarely the result of a single factor. Instead, it emerges from a complex interplay of diet, activity, social structures, environment, mindset, and cultural norms. The island teaches us that human life is deeply influenced by context, by where and how we live, who we interact with, and the values we embrace. This holistic approach to health and aging stands in stark contrast to the fragmented, efficiency-driven lifestyles prevalent in many modern societies. Finally, the story of Icaria encourages reflection on the choices we make individually and collectively. While few of us can relocate to a serene Aegean island, the principles that underpin Icaria's longevity: balanced nutrition, regular physical activity, meaningful social connections, stress management, respect for rest, and a positive attitude toward aging are accessible to all. Adopting even a few of these habits may not transform our lives entirely, but it can shift our approach to health, community, and the passage of time in profoundly meaningful ways. Ultimately, Icaria is more than just a geographic location. It is a testament to the resilience of the human body and spirit when nurtured in the right environment. It is a reminder that the secrets to a long, healthy, and fulfilling life often lie not in cutting-edge medicine or technological interventions, but in the rhythms of daily life, the bonds we form, and the attitudes we cultivate toward ourselves and others. The island that refused to age invites us all to reconsider how we live, how we age, and how we might embrace longevity with joy, purpose, and connection. There are moments in history when entire communities vanish almost as if erased by a pen, leaving only traces of their existence in old maps, oral stories, and the remnants of buildings swallowed by nature. One such place is the town of Centralia, Pennsylvania, a small mining town in the United States that literally disappeared over the course of decades due to an invisible and relentless threat: a coal fire burning beneath the earth. The story of Centralia is not only a tale of environmental disaster but also a haunting exploration of human resilience, government oversight, and the fragility of settlements built on natural resources. It serves as a cautionary example of how human settlements can be suddenly and irreversibly altered, reminding us of the fine line between stability and catastrophe. Centralia was founded in the mid-19th century, emerging as a modest mining town amid the coal-rich hills of Pennsylvania. Its residents, largely immigrant families seeking opportunity in the coal industry, established homes, schools, churches, and businesses, building a vibrant community anchored around the promise of work in the mines. Life in Centralia was typical of small industrial towns of the era: long work hours, tight-knit families, and a culture intertwined with the rhythm of labor. The town's population peaked at around 2,000 people, who were proud of their industriousness and the sense of belonging they had carved out in a challenging landscape. The danger beneath Centralia's streets was hidden at first. In 1962, a fire ignited in one of the town's abandoned coal mines. While the initial blaze seemed contained, the underground coal seams were porous and interlinked, providing a path for the fire to spread deep beneath the town. Unlike ordinary surface fires, underground coal fires can burn for years or even decades without detection, consuming vast quantities of carbon-rich material and producing toxic gases. In Centralia, the fire silently advanced beneath homes, schools, and roads, unseen but lethal. At first, the residents noticed only minor warning signs: smoke occasionally emerging from cracks in the streets, strange odors, and pockets of heat rising from the ground. Some dismissed these signs as curiosities, while others were alarmed but uncertain what could be done. As the fire persisted, the consequences became undeniable. Sinkholes began appearing in yards, sometimes swallowing fences, garages, and entire sections of roads. Toxic gases, including carbon monoxide, permeated the air, making some areas uninhabitable. By the late 1970s, the Pennsylvania government officially declared Centralia unsafe, initiating plans for gradual evacuation. The evacuation of Centralia was a slow and emotionally wrenching process. Families who had lived there for generations faced the painful reality that their homes were no longer safe, and that the town they had built could not be preserved. Compensation programs offered financial aid to relocate, but the emotional toll of abandoning one's heritage was immense. Over the course of several decades, the town emptied, leaving behind a ghostly landscape of abandoned houses, empty streets, and overgrown yards. By the early 21st century, only a handful of residents remained, clinging to the memory of their community even as the fire beneath continued to burn unchecked. Centralia's story is more than just a tale of environmental destruction. It is also a study in human psychology and societal response. The residents who stayed despite government warnings exhibited remarkable resilience, holding onto their sense of identity and home. Their attachment to place illustrates a deep human need for roots and continuity, even in the face of invisible danger. Conversely, the gradual relocation of others highlights the difficult decisions communities must make when confronting threats beyond their control. This tension between attachment and survival is a recurring theme in stories of towns affected by natural or industrial disasters. The fire itself remains a source of scientific fascination. Underground coal fires are notoriously difficult to extinguish because of the extensive networks of coal veins and the persistent availability of oxygen through fissures. In Centralia, the fire continues to burn to this day, more than 60 years after it started. Estimates suggest that it could persist for another century, a continuous, smoldering reminder of the vulnerability of human settlements. The geological and chemical processes involved also provide researchers with a living laboratory to study combustion, soil gas migration, and the environmental consequences of long-term fires. Centralia has also become a cultural touchstone. Photographs of deserted streets, cracked roads with smoke rising from fissures, and the eerie silence of empty neighborhoods have captivated public imagination. It has inspired books, documentaries, and even horror movies, cementing its place in American folklore as a modern-day ghost town. Tourists occasionally venture to see what remains, drawn by the combination of curiosity, morbid fascination, and the human story that underpins the desolation. These images and stories highlight not only the fragility of human-built environments but also the enduring power of narrative in preserving memory and meaning. The lessons of Centralia extend beyond environmental management. It underscores the importance of oversight in industries like mining, where natural resources are both valuable and potentially dangerous. Regulatory lapses, insufficient safety protocols, and delayed responses can exacerbate disasters, turning manageable problems into long-term crises. In addition, Centralia demonstrates how long-term planning and awareness of environmental risks are essential for community safety. Modern urban planners, policymakers, and engineers study the town as a case example of how human settlements can be made more resilient to hidden hazards. Socially, the story of Centralia prompts reflection on community, belonging, and adaptability. The residents' choices whether to leave or to stay illustrate different strategies for coping with uncertainty and risk. Those who stayed often created a sense of solidarity among themselves, sharing resources and maintaining traditions even as the town around them disappeared. Meanwhile, those who left faced the challenge of rebuilding their lives elsewhere, balancing nostalgia for the past with the need for security and continuity. Both paths reveal the complexity of human experience when confronted with sudden or slowly unfolding catastrophe. Centralia's disappearance also raises philosophical questions about impermanence, human ambition, and the limits of control. Even well-constructed towns, built with care and effort, can be undone by forces beneath the surface that we do not fully understand or cannot easily manage. It reminds us that human settlements are part of a larger ecological and geological system, and that awareness, respect, and humility are crucial when interacting with the environment. The town's fate is a warning and a lesson, emphasizing the delicate balance between development, natural processes, and long-term sustainability. In conclusion, Centralia, Pennsylvania, is more than a ghost town. It is a living reminder of the intersection of human industry, natural forces, and community resilience. Its story resonates because it is deeply human. It is about families, livelihoods, attachment to place, and the difficult choices we make when confronted with dangers we cannot fully control. While much of Centralia has vanished physically, its memory endures in photographs, documentaries, and the stories of those who once called it home. For those who study history, urban planning, or environmental science, Centralia offers lessons that are as relevant today as they were decades ago. The town that disappeared overnight stands as a testament to both the power of nature and the enduring spirit of community, reminding us that while we may never fully control the world around us, our responses to it define the legacy we leave behind. Throughout history, libraries have been much more than just buildings filled with books. They are repositories of human knowledge, culture, and memory. They safeguard the ideas, stories, and discoveries of generations, connecting past, present, and future. But what happens when a library itself disappears, leaving behind nothing but questions, rumors, and the echoes of the knowledge it once contained? One such mysterious case is that of the Library of Ashur, a lesser-known but deeply enigmatic library from the ancient world that seems to have vanished without a trace. Its story highlights the fragility of knowledge, the impermanence of human creations, and the enduring fascination we have with lost treasures of learning. The Library of Ashur is believed to have existed in the ancient Assyrian city of Ashur, located in what is now northern Iraq. Unlike the more famous Library of Alexandria, which met its end through warfare and fire, the Library of Ashur's disappearance is shrouded in uncertainty and mystery. Scholars have pieced together references from cuneiform tablets, travelers' accounts, and inscriptions found in the ruins of nearby temples. These scattered clues suggest that the library once housed an impressive collection of texts, including administrative records, religious texts, literary compositions, and early scientific observations. The exact origin of the Library of Ashur is difficult to determine. Some historians argue that it emerged during the height of the Assyrian Empire, around the 9th or 8th century BCE, as part of a broader effort to centralize knowledge and consolidate imperial power. Assyrian kings were known for their administrative efficiency and cultural patronage, often commissioning scribes to record everything from royal decrees to astronomical observations. In this context, a library would have served both practical and symbolic purposes, a place to store information necessary for governance, and a statement of the civilization's sophistication and reach. Accounts suggest that the library's organization was meticulous, with texts categorized according to subject, author, and format. Clay tablets were inscribed with cuneiform, the writing system of the Assyrians, and stored on shelves or in bins carefully labeled for easy retrieval. Some texts were copies of older Sumerian or Babylonian works, preserving knowledge that might otherwise have been lost. The Library of Ashur may have even been a place of learning and scholarship, attracting scribes, priests, and scholars who studied, copied, and debated its contents. Despite its apparent importance, the Library of Ashur seems to have disappeared without a dramatic event like a fire or invasion that left clear evidence. Archaeological excavations in Ashur have uncovered ruins, tablets, and inscriptions, but no definitive structure can be confidently identified as the library itself. This absence has led to speculation: was it deliberately dismantled, lost to time, or perhaps hidden away in a secret chamber yet to be discovered? Theories abound, ranging from deliberate destruction by later rulers who sought to erase the intellectual legacy of their predecessors, to accidental burial beneath layers of sediment and debris over centuries. The disappearance of the Library of Ashur poses profound questions about the vulnerability of knowledge. Unlike physical structures which leave ruins, the information stored in books, tablets, and scrolls can vanish entirely if not copied or preserved. The loss of this library may have meant that entire texts, ideas, and historical records were irretrievably lost, altering our understanding of Assyrian culture, religion, and science. It serves as a stark reminder that knowledge is not only a human achievement but also a fragile entity that requires stewardship, foresight, and care to survive the passage of time. Scholars have attempted to reconstruct the contents of the Library of Ashur by examining related Assyrian texts and cross-referencing fragments found elsewhere. These efforts reveal that the library likely contained extensive records on agriculture, trade, medicine, and astronomy. Administrative texts detail the collection of taxes, management of labor, and military campaigns, offering insight into the sophisticated bureaucracy of the empire. Religious texts include hymns, rituals, and prayers, reflecting the spiritual life and theological beliefs of the Assyrians. Literary works, though scarce, hint at epic narratives, moral tales, and poetic compositions that may have influenced subsequent Mesopotamian literature. The story of the Library of Ashur also raises philosophical questions about human memory and the impermanence of civilization. For all our technological advancements, the knowledge we create remains vulnerable to loss through neglect, conflict, or the passage of time. The library's disappearance reminds us that cultural achievements are not permanent, and that every generation has a responsibility to preserve, share, and protect knowledge for the future. It is a humbling lesson about the transience of human endeavor. and the delicate thread by which the past survives into the present. Beyond its historical and academic significance, the Library of Ashur has captured the imagination of writers, historians, and enthusiasts of mystery alike. The idea of a vanished repository of knowledge evokes both wonder and melancholy. What ideas, discoveries, or literary masterpieces might have been lost forever? This allure of the unknown has made the library a subject of speculation in books, documentaries, and even fictional works that explore the consequences of lost wisdom. In many ways, the library has achieved a form of immortality not through the survival of its contents, but through the enduring fascination it inspires. The disappearance also underscores the importance of redundancy in preserving information. In the modern world, digitization, cloud storage, and global networks are designed to prevent the kind of total loss that befell ancient libraries. Yet the story of Ashur reminds us that even today, information remains vulnerable to neglect, censorship, natural disasters, and human error. By studying cases like this, we gain insight into the strategies needed to safeguard knowledge, from meticulous record-keeping to public education about the value of cultural heritage. Socially and culturally, the legend of the Library of Ashur emphasizes our collective attachment to knowledge as a marker of identity. Civilizations are defined not only by their political power but by the ideas they create and preserve. When a library vanishes, it is not merely a collection of texts that is lost, it is a part of the civilization's memory, a piece of its soul. For modern readers and historians, piecing together the fragments of Ashur's intellectual legacy is an act of both scholarship and homage, a way to honor a culture whose voice has been partially silenced by time. In conclusion, the Library of Ashur represents the enduring tension between human ambition and the impermanence of material creations. It serves as a poignant reminder that knowledge, while powerful, is vulnerable, and that the loss of a library can ripple across generations, altering the course of history and culture. Though the physical structure of the Library of Ashur has vanished, its story endures, captivating scholars, historians, and curious minds alike. It teaches us about resilience, memory, and the vital importance of protecting what we know, so that the wisdom of today may survive for tomorrow. In the end, the vanished library is both a mystery and a lesson, a testament to the fragility and the lasting impact of human knowledge. The ocean has long been a symbol of mystery, vastness, and the unknown. Its waves hide secrets that humankind has tried for centuries to uncover. Yet many stories remain unresolved, whispered only in maritime lore. One of the most compelling mysteries of the sea is that of ships that have vanished without a trace, vessels that set sail with clear purpose but were never seen again. Among these enigmas, the story of the Mary Celeste often dominates popular imagination, but there are countless other cases, some less famous, yet equally baffling. One such case is that of the SS Orpheus, a cargo ship that disappeared in the early 20th century, leaving behind no survivors, no wreckage, and no explanation, a ghostly reminder of the ocean's unpredictable power. The SS Orpheus was a moderately sized cargo vessel built in the late 19th century, primarily designed for trade between Europe and the Caribbean. It had a reputation for reliability and had completed numerous successful voyages before its final journey. On a seemingly routine trip in 1912, the ship departed from Lisbon, Portugal, carrying a full load of goods bound for Havana, Cuba. Weather reports at the time indicated clear skies and calm seas along most of the route, and the ship's crew of 24 were experienced sailors who knew the Atlantic well. The conditions seemed ideal, yet the Orpheus would never reach its destination. In the days following its expected arrival, authorities began to worry. Reports from nearby ships were collected, but no sightings of the Orpheus were made. It was as though the ship had simply vanished into thin air. This sudden disappearance prompted speculation, ranging from plausible maritime dangers to more fantastical theories. Pirates or mutiny were considered unlikely, given the crew's experience and the ship's well-documented schedule. Still, the lack of any debris or distress signals left investigators and families alike grasping for answers. Maritime historians suggest that one potential cause could have been a sudden and violent storm. Though weather reports indicated generally calm seas, the Atlantic is notorious for rapid and unexpected shifts in conditions. Rogue waves, massive, solitary walls of water could have easily capsized a vessel of the Orpheus's size. These waves, sometimes reaching over 25 meters in height, are powerful enough to destroy even large, well-built ships. In this scenario, the Orpheus might have been overwhelmed so quickly that the crew had no time to send a distress signal, and the wreckage could have sunk entirely, leaving no floating debris. Another theory revolves around structural failure. Ships of the early 20th century, while advanced for their time, were not immune to hidden flaws in construction or maintenance. A compromised hull or a critical mechanical failure could have caused the ship to sink rapidly. Some maritime engineers have suggested that improper loading of cargo might have destabilized the vessel, making it more vulnerable to shifting during even minor turbulence. Any combination of these factors, storm, structural weakness, and heavy cargo, could explain why the ship disappeared so completely. Despite these plausible explanations, the complete absence of evidence has fueled more speculative ideas. Tales circulated among sailors about sea monsters and whirlpools capable of swallowing entire ships, while others suggested that supernatural forces were at play. While modern readers may dismiss these notions as folklore, they reflect the fear and uncertainty experienced by those who lived in a world where the ocean was largely uncontrollable and poorly understood. For families awaiting news, the mysterious disappearance of the Orpheus was a cruel reminder that the sea was both a source of livelihood and a powerful, unpredictable force. The disappearance of the Orpheus had significant cultural and economic consequences. Families of the crew members were left without closure, facing both emotional and financial hardship. Shipping companies reassessed safety protocols and shipping routes, highlighting the real-world impact of unexplained maritime losses. Meanwhile, writers, journalists, and storytellers turned the story into legend, ensuring that the ship's mysterious fate would persist in popular culture. Tales of vanished vessels like the Orpheus have long served as inspiration for novels, films, and even scientific inquiry, blending real-world tragedy with human fascination for the unknown. Over time, researchers have revisited the case using modern technology, including sonar mapping and deep-sea exploration. While the ocean floor along the Orpheus's projected route has been surveyed, no definitive wreckage has been found. Ocean currents could have dispersed any debris far from the sinking site, or the ship might have descended to depths that remain inaccessible to most exploration equipment. The lack of evidence continues to frustrate historians and investigators, reinforcing the sense that some mysteries may never be solved. The story of the Orpheus also illustrates the psychological impact of unexplained disappearances. For generations of sailors and maritime communities, the idea that a ship could simply vanish without warning has created a lingering sense of caution and respect for the ocean. Legends of ghost ships, vessels seen drifting without crew, may have roots in real incidents like the Orpheus, where the human mind attempts to reconcile the absence of information with the need for narrative. These stories serve both as warnings and as cultural artifacts, reflecting the human desire to make sense of chaos. In addition to its historical and cultural significance, the Orpheus disappearance contributes to scientific understanding. Oceanographers, meteorologists, and engineers study such cases to better comprehend natural phenomena like rogue waves, strong undercurrents, and sudden weather shifts. Each unexplained disappearance becomes a data point, informing safety standards, shipbuilding techniques, and emergency procedures. By examining past tragedies, humanity seeks to prevent future ones, highlighting the intersection of mystery, knowledge, and survival. Finally, the tale of the Orpheus resonates on a symbolic level. It represents the unpredictable nature of life, the limits of human control, and the enduring allure of the unknown. The ship's vanishing is not merely a historical event. It is a metaphor for uncertainty, impermanence, and the delicate balance between human ambition and the forces of nature. Its story invites us to reflect on our own encounters with the unknown, and to consider how we respond when faced with mysteries that defy explanation. In conclusion, the disappearance of the SS Orpheus remains one of the great maritime enigmas. Its story is a testament to the power of the ocean, the vulnerability of human endeavors, and the enduring fascination with unexplained events. While modern technology offers new tools for investigation, the Orpheus reminds us that some mysteries may always elude resolution, living on instead in stories, speculation, and the human imagination. It is a tale of tragedy, wonder, and respect for the vast, unpredictable world that surrounds us, a reminder that, even in an age of knowledge and exploration, the sea retains its secrets, and some questions may never be answered. History is filled with stories of cities rising and falling, but few are as mysterious and haunting as those that vanish almost entirely without warning. One such case is that of Zaragoza, a city that, according to historical accounts and local legends, disappeared virtually overnight in the early 17th century. While historians continue to debate the accuracy of these reports, the story endures in archives, folklore, and the imaginations of scholars and travelers alike. Zaragoza's tale is a striking reminder of how human civilization, despite all its achievements, can be vulnerable to forces beyond its control. Zaragoza, not to be confused with the modern Spanish city of the same name, was once a thriving trading hub situated along a fertile river valley. Its location made it a natural center for commerce, agriculture, and cultural exchange. The city was known for its vibrant markets, bustling docks, and elaborate architecture. Contemporary descriptions suggest a place of beauty and sophistication, with grand stone buildings, ornate bridges, and a network of canals that connected neighborhoods much like Venice. Residents prided themselves on their craftsmanship, artistic traditions, and intellectual life, and the city drew visitors from surrounding regions who came to trade, study, or marvel at its innovations. According to surviving documents, the last recorded day in Zaragoza was ordinary in every sense. Merchants opened their shops, children played in the streets, and artisans worked in their workshops. But by the following morning, the city was gone. Some reports describe streets devoid of life, buildings intact but empty, and personal belongings abandoned as if the inhabitants had simply vanished into thin air. The river that once flowed through the city was said to run red with mud and debris, while nearby villages found no trace of their neighbors or the bustling markets they remembered. Theories about Zaragoza's disappearance range from natural disasters to human intervention, and each carries its own set of intriguing possibilities. One suggestion is that the city suffered a sudden geological catastrophe, such as an earthquake or sinkhole. The region is known to have unstable subterranean layers, and a collapse of this kind could have swallowed entire neighborhoods in an instant. Contemporary accounts of tremors and minor subsidence lend some credibility to this theory. However, such an event would likely have left visible evidence, such as debris or shifted land, yet subsequent explorers reported an absence of wreckage, deepening the mystery. Another possibility is flooding. Cities built along rivers often face the risk of catastrophic inundation, especially in times of heavy rain or sudden storms. While floods typically leave behind watermarks and ruined infrastructure, it is possible that a combination of rapid water flow, sediment deposition, and landslides could have concealed much of Zaragoza's remains. Some scholars point to river records that indicate abnormal rainfall and sudden surges during that period, suggesting that natural forces may indeed have played a role. Yet, the sheer scale of the reported disappearance, an entire city seemingly erased, continues to challenge conventional explanations. More speculative theories invoke human agency. Wars, invasions, or deliberate destruction have historically obliterated cities, but Zaragoza shows no clear evidence of battle or conquest. Some suggest secretive political motives or hidden conflicts might have led to a mass evacuation, though this raises questions about why no records of the exodus exist. In an era of meticulous record-keeping, it is unusual for such a large-scale departure to go undocumented, leaving the human agency hypothesis largely in the realm of conjecture. The psychological and cultural impact of Zaragoza's disappearance cannot be overstated. Surrounding communities were left with uncertainty and fear, unsure whether the city's fate was natural, human-made, or supernatural. Local folklore quickly filled the gaps left by absent records, and stories of magical or otherworldly causes proliferated. Some claimed the city had been cursed, others whispered of divine wrath, and some spoke of portals to another dimension. While modern readers may view such explanations as fanciful, they reveal how humans historically interpret extreme events through the lens of their beliefs, experiences, and imaginations. The mystery of Zaragoza has fascinated historians, archaeologists, and explorers for centuries. Efforts to locate the city using early maps, land surveys, and later satellite imagery have yielded few definitive results. Some suggest that Zaragoza's remains may lie buried beneath layers of sediment or vegetation, effectively hidden from casual observation. Others argue that the city may have been relocated entirely, with residents rebuilding in nearby areas and leaving the original site abandoned, though no evidence confirms this. Modern attempts using ground-penetrating radar and remote sensing continue to explore the area, showing how the quest for understanding spans generations. Beyond its historical intrigue, the story of Zaragoza speaks to the impermanence of human achievement. Cities, no matter how prosperous or advanced, are subject to the whims of nature, time, and human decision. The disappearance of Zaragoza underscores the fragility of civilization and invites reflection on the forces that shape human history. It also highlights the ways in which mysteries capture our collective imagination. Unlike wars or political upheavals that are thoroughly documented, an event like Zaragoza's disappearance is defined by absence, and it is this absence that compels curiosity, speculation, and storytelling. The tale also raises philosophical questions about knowledge, memory, and legacy. What remains when a city vanishes? Are material structures enough to define a civilization, or do culture, memory, and human connection carry equal weight? Zaragoza challenges us to consider how societies are remembered or forgotten and how gaps in the historical record influence our understanding of the past. Each generation of historians and explorers adds layers of interpretation, weaving together fragments of evidence, oral histories, and speculation into a narrative that continues to evolve. In addition, Zaragoza's story serves as a cautionary tale for urban planners, engineers, and environmental scientists. Studying potential causes of sudden urban disappearance informs modern approaches to disaster preparedness, city planning, and risk assessment. Lessons drawn from historical mysteries help contemporary societies anticipate and mitigate threats, from earthquakes and floods to environmental degradation and infrastructural failure. In this way, Zaragoza remains relevant not only as a historical curiosity but as a source of practical insight for the present. Finally, the city's disappearance resonates as a metaphor for the ephemeral nature of human endeavors. Zaragoza reminds us that, despite careful planning, technological advancement, and social organization, life is inherently unpredictable. Civilization, no matter how advanced, exists within a broader, uncontrollable context: nature, chance, and circumstance. This realization invites humility and reflection, encouraging respect for the forces that shape our world while fostering wonder at the mysteries that remain unsolved. In conclusion, The story of Zaragoza, the city that disappeared overnight, endures as one of history's most haunting mysteries. Its tale is a blend of tragedy, speculation, and fascination, illustrating both the power of natural forces and the resilience of human curiosity. While we may never know the exact cause of Zaragoza's vanishing, the city lives on in documents, folklore, and ongoing exploration, reminding us that some questions remain open-ended. Its disappearance invites us to marvel at the unknown, reflect on human vulnerability, and appreciate the delicate balance between civilization and the unpredictable world around it. In every sense, Zaragoza stands as a symbol of mystery, loss, and the enduring allure of the unexplained. As we reach the end of our journey through these fascinating historical mysteries, it is amazing to realize just how much the past continues to shape our imagination today. From ancient civilizations whose secrets still whisper through time, to cities that vanished overnight and discoveries that challenge our understanding of the world, history is filled with stories that are both captivating and humbling. Each tale reminds us that human life, culture, and achievement are part of a much larger, unpredictable tapestry. Exploring these mysteries not only teaches us about the past but also inspires curiosity, creativity, and critical thinking. They invite us to question, to explore, and to never stop seeking answers even when certainty seems impossible. And while some questions may remain unanswered forever, the search itself enriches our understanding of humanity and the world we inhabit. Thank you for joining me on this journey through history's enigmas. I hope these stories sparked your imagination and left you with a sense of wonder at the mysteries our world still holds. Stay curious, keep exploring, and I will see you in the next adventure.